Today, Brazil will hand over the presidency of the G20 to South Africa. President of Brazil, Lula da Silva, who will be handing the presidency over to our president, Cyril Ramaphosa, he's expected to call on South Africa to continue to put the interests of the developing countries firmly on the agenda. Yesterday, President Ramaphosa said South Africa supports the theme of the G20 in Brazil that is anchored on social inclusion and fighting poverty and hunger. For more on this, we joined by SABC News International Editor Sophie Mokoena. Sophie, how important is this moment for the continent? Because this will be the first time that an African country is taking over the presidency of G20.
This is a very important moment for the Sub-Sahara, particularly the developing South, or the South-South as we know it, because this is the moment again to continue the agenda of the developing South. You know that it was India, it continued to push for the agendas and the interest of the developing South, and President Lula is doing the same. As you can see, the theme of this summit in Rio de Janeiro is social inclusion, fighting hunger and poverty. These are the issues that are affecting developing nations. And yesterday, President Ramaphosa, as you pointed out, did indicate that they will continue to support Brazil, and therefore it will be a good transition, and you will have synergy between the outgoing and the incoming. And the president yesterday made it clear that the focus will again be on the developing South. This is also a moment to push for the transformation of the multilateral institutions, including those that deal with finances or supporting developing and developed nations, such as your IMF and the World Bank. You know, there has been an argument that these institutions must be transformed so that they are able to give developing countries resources. And as they give these developing countries and poorer nations loans, they don't give them loans that they can't pay back, loans in terms of interest that are equal to their own GDPs. Let's listen at what the president had to say yesterday in a closed session when he was talking about the focus of the G20 in Brazil, but also giving an indication where South Africa is going.
South Africa fully supports the Brazilian presidency's focus on social inclusion and the fight against hunger. It is only through an integrated and comprehensive system of social support that we will be able to assist the most vulnerable in society. According to the World Bank, nearly 700 million people are currently living in extreme poverty. This is unacceptable. Sub-Saharan Africa accounts for 67% of these people.
Yeah, very interesting discussions there. But I suppose, Sophie, the big question is, what will South Africa be focusing in on? What is our theme going forward?
South Africa will be focusing on developing nations. We know that earlier on, when the Minister of International Relations had a briefing, he pointed out that the theme will focus on developmental priorities of the Global South and also particularly the African continent, where they will look at equitable world to ensure that also there's peace and security, because if you have a peaceful world, you'll have a better development. We know that earlier on this year, we saw the visit of the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Amina Mohammed, in South Africa, and she had a meeting with the officials of DIRCO, including the presidency, in terms of preparations for the G20 in South Africa next year. And she emphasized a need for South Africa to continue to push that countries are able to meet their SDGs. And South Africa will also push for a similar campaign to ensure that much as countries are lagging behind in achieving their developmental goals, they do catch up. And also the important issue, peace and security. As you heard there, Kate Fisher talking about the issue of the war in Ukraine, leading to a situation where the communique or the text of the summit, it's not clear on that, because this issue all the time since the war started in Ukraine, you find a situation where countries don't agree. And I think this is a moment to ensure that South Africa is able to pull countries together to push for peace in the Middle East if the war will still be raging, and also a finalization of the matters in relation to Ukraine. But let's see, because Donald Trump will be there, and whether there will be some distraction or perhaps maybe him bringing in new things as the incoming after South Africa.
Sure, yeah. Also going to be an interesting one where we see South Africa hand over to America next, because that's what's going to be happening. And more than likely, we're going to see our President Ramaphosa handed over to President-elect Donald Trump, who will be the president next year. And he'll be here visiting South Africa. I mean, that's the expectation, right?
Yes, it is the expectation, but let's see what happens next year. He will be taking office in the mid-January, and I think we'll get a sense whether he will be coming to Africa. The previous term, he had no interest in visiting Africa. Maybe this time around because of, guess who? Elon Musk.
Imagine. All right, let's leave it there. Sophie, thank you. Thanks for giving us an update and throwing forward to what may very well be next year.